Sir, you are in live. Good to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Shilpi Shah from Ahmedabad. I welcome all of you to this webinar. We are extremely privileged to have very eminent speakers and panelists today with us. So to make most of this learning experience, I'll request you to switch off your audios and videos, and please use the chat box for any queries that you have. So without wasting much time, we'll get started with our first talk. That is ROP screening in an Indian scenario. So what is retinopathy of prematurity? It is a disease of retinal vessel development in the premature babies. It is characterized by abnormal retinal vessel proliferation, bleeding, scarring, and eventually retinal detachment and blindness. It is one of the leading cause of preventable infant blindness. Now, ROP is not an ancient disease. The first case was reported in 1942, and ever since, about 3 distinct ROP epidemics have been described. The first that happened in 1940s in Western countries in larger premature babies who received unmonitored oxygen. The second epidemic also happened in the advanced countries with increased survival of extreme premature babies despite judicious use of oxygen. And the third epidemic is currently ongoing in India and other middle income countries, as we can see from the large number of premature births that we are having. Now, this third epidemic is a combination of first and second, which means in India, we are seeing babies with ROP who are extremely premature and received optimal neonatal care, and despite their having ROP, and we are also seeing ROP in larger babies with minimal risk factors. So what is the disease burden in India? We are having about 2.7 crore annual live births, of which 20 lakh babies are born with birth weight less than 2 kilos, and they are all at risk of developing ROP. The incidence of any stage of ROP is somewhere between 20 to 54%. And out of this, 7 to 20% will go on to develop severe ROP, which will require treatment. According to one estimate, every 2 hours, there are 3 infants who will reach threshold for treatment in India. And if untreated, they'll end up in blindness. Now, these were the headlines which shook our medical fraternity when Supreme Court ordered compensation of rupees 1.8 crore to a Chennai girl blinded by ROP due to medical negligence. And ever since, there have been several litigation cases in ROP, all of which against pediatricians or ophthalmologists, and a heavy compensation has been ordered, which means it is imperative for us to provide ROP care, and it has to be a systematically documented process. Now, according to international classification, the retina has been divided into 3 imaginary zones. The zone 1 is the central, most posterior part of the retina. Zone 2 is the concentric circle around it, and zone 3 is the most peripheral temporal crescent, which means if the location of ROP is in zone 1, it is more severe compared to the peripheral zone 3. Now, ROP classically goes through stages 1 to 5. Stage 1 is a fine white demarcation line, as you can see here, between the vascular and avascular immature retina. If that goes into stage 2, that fine white line becomes a thick white ridge. There are still chances that stage 1 and 2, if the baby's systemic parameters get settled, the retina might still develop, which means we don't treat, but we closely observe stage 1 and 2 babies. If that goes into stage 3, that means there are abnormal blood vessels proliferating in that area, which leads to retinal hemorrhages. Untreated, this stage will go into stage 4, which is partially detached retina, as you can see here. And stage 5 is the total retinal detachment. The plus disease is dilated, tortuous, angry looking blood vessels, even on the posterior pole of the retina. Now there is another very aggressive form called APROP. As the name suggests, this aggressive posterior ROP is the most aggressive form of ROP, which happens mainly in zone 1 and posterior zone 2 and is characterized by flat new vessels. Now this rapidly progresses to retinal detachment without going through the classic stage 1 to 3. And despite timely treatment, there are higher rate of failure, complications, and recurrences in cases of APROP. Now, which are the babies who will develop severe ROP? The dictum is smallest survival, highest risk. That means smaller the gestational age and lower the birth weight, they are at the highest risk of developing ROP. Now, apart from oxygen, which is a known risk factor, there are several other risk factors like severe sepsis, inadequate weight gain in the early weeks, transfusion of blood products. But Dr. Ashish Mehta in his talk will tell us in detail about all this. Now, ROP, why is it an ideal condition to screen? So, first, the population at risk is already in hospital. We are not going out in community to look for them. Remember, no baby is born with ROP. That means there is no disease at time of birth. The natural history of ROP is also well known, which means there is only immature retina at birth, and the active ROP generally happens between day 20 to 30, and which, if untreated, goes into the stage of visual impairment by 6 to 7 weeks. There is a partial retinal detachment, and it ends up in the stage of blindness by 3rd month. So we know that we have a narrow window of opportunity to act during this period between around day 30. So which babies to be screened? So in an Indian setting, any premature infant born at gestational age 34 weeks or less, and or if the birth weight is less than 2 kg, they should all be screened for ROP. Even if the baby did not receive any oxygen, if he falls under this category, they must be screened for ROP. Now, sometimes there are larger babies which do not fall into this screening criteria, but if the treating pediatrician feels that they've had other risk factors, like prolonged oxygen administration, the baby was ventilated, then they can still send in those babies for screening. Now, when to start the first screening? The rule of thumb is the first ROP screening needs to be done by the 30th day of life. However, for the very small babies born with gestational age less than 28 weeks, we do recommend slightly earlier screening to be commenced by the 2nd or 3rd week of life. And then the further follow-up screening would be based on the finding of this screening. But generally, all babies need to be monitored until they reach full retinal maturation. Now, before the screening procedure, the babies need fully dilated pupil with phenylephrine and tropicamide, generally 1 drop to be instilled in both eyes 3 times, roughly 10 to 15 minutes apart. You have to watch the pulse and respiration of the baby. And clearly, the screening needs to be done with the indirect ophthalmoscope because the handheld direct ophthalmoscope can only give a very limited field of vision. The screening procedure also requires a sterile infant lid speculum and a depressor to rotate the eyeball and see the periphery of the eye. Now, the imaging in ROP has come up a big time in the past decade. These are infant fundus cameras, the handpiece of which is rested on baby's cornea, which then captures wide-field digital fundus images. Clarity's RATCAM was the first of its kind, but now we have a Neophorus, which is made in India, which is much lighter handpiece and much cheaper with equally good images. There are also some smartphone-based devices available which are much lower in cost and they do not touch baby's cornea. However, to obtain the periphery of the retina is a task and there is a learning curve with these devices. So what are the advantages of photo documentation? Of course, it is an objective evidence. It not only enhances consultation with the parents, it can be used for medical legal purposes and academic purposes. But most importantly, it opens up the avenues for the telemedicine and artificial intelligence using deep neural networks. So why telemedicine for ROP screening? So if we look at India has about 3.5 million preterm babies. And currently we have about 200 ROP experts across the country who can provide screening as well as treatment. And less than 15 ROP centers, majority of which are located in urban area. So as you can see, there is a hugely skewed demand and supply. So what happens is these infant fundus cameras are carried to NICUs by trained ophthalmic imagers, which can also grade the images. They take the fundus pictures of the babies and upload it, which can be reviewed by the retina specialist in the remote area, and they can send the recommendations back. Now, the first telemedicine ROP project was initiated by KidDrop under the Narayan Netralay and Dr. Anand Vinekar's able leadership. And ever since it, many states in India are using it. Our Gujarat ROP project is headed by Dr. Alabankar. Now, which babies need ROP treatment? So now type 1 ROP, which is a pre-threshold ROP, is the time to treat those babies. To keep it simplified, any stage 3 disease, which means if there are new vessels and retinal hemorrhages, or if any plus disease present, we must treat those babies. So as we have seen, ROP is a race against time. And with appropriate team approach, we can defeat it. Starting from the obstetric care, they need to give the antenatal steroids timely, and then the neonatal care has to be optimal, where NICU nursing staff also has a key role to play. Parents and caretakers need to be educated about the disease and the implications of missing follow-up appointments. And of course, the retina specialist and the anesthetic care for any ROP procedure is also important. And remember, these babies will need lifelong follow-ups for the optical and the rehabilitation of vision, because they might end up having squint or refractive errors or amblyopia. We even have Indian ROP Society, which is about 200 members, with the goal to make ROP care more standardized, accessible, affordable to rural as well as urban areas. So to summarize, it is very important to save premature babies, but also important to save them from blindness. ROP screening and treatment is mandatory for all babies born 34 weeks or less gestational age and less than 2 kilos of birth weight. And it has to be done by 30th day of life. Any suboptimal management will expose us to medical legal liability. And remember, ROP blindness is preventable with timely and apt multidisciplinary approach. Thank you so much for the patience listening. Now we will take the questions at the end. Keep sending in your questions. We'll go on to our next talk. It's Dr. Ashish Mehta, who's a top neonatologist. He's the director at Arpan Newborn Care Center, which is a state-of-art center. In his 3 decades long career, he has obtained varied experience starting from Bardia Hospital to Hinduja Hospital to Sydney and Melbourne. He has even extended his services to Sick Kids Hospital in Canada. He has taken the initiative of setting up Breast Milk Bank, which is one of its kind in the state. We look forward to his talk. He'll tell us more about the prevention aspects of ROP.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, friends. At the onset, let me thank Shilpi and the Eye Care Center, Eye Vision Center for this opportunity. It is nice to be with all of you, the stalwarts in the field of ophthalmology and the particular ROP group. Long back when we started neonatal practice, it was the time where the ROP was less heard, and that was a time where the babies were anesthetized to see retina, to look for the ROP. This is 2001, 1999. And then on, Dr. Banker, Dr. Shilpi, Dr. Vinakar, they have taken the initiative to a level where we have got RedCam and other sophisticated modalities by which it is easily being picked up and being treated these days. If you look at, I'll start with my presentation now. If you look at the ROP, it's a really global problem. And while I was looking at the data, I was surprised to see this number. Basically, this is 2010 data, 2 lakh preterm babies develop any stage ROP in the world at this time. And out of that, 10% in 2010 were severely visually impaired. And out of this, 12,300 developed mild to moderate visual impairment. My worry is this statement, 65 of this is coming from our area, middle income regions. And out of that, good number of babies are more than 32 weeks. Again, these two statements are worrisome. This is the place where I strongly feel there is a role of neonatology where this number can be improved. This is the continuation of the same thing that I'm saying. Let's look at the Indian number and Indian color. We are far away from the realistic figure that we are supposed to be less than 10 per 1 lakh live births as far as impairment and blindness from the ROP is concerned. We are between 10 to 45, between 45 to 75 per 1 lakh birth, and that's a worrisome data. When you look at the prevention, you try to find out pathogenesis of the disease process. And we all know that the day Virginia Apgar started putting the Apgar score, somehow the culture was to see that all babies should look pink at birth. So the unmonitored or the freedom for the oxygen was there in most of the NICU of USA and the Western Europe. And this brought a lot of ROP during that time. The moment first epidemic occurred, hyperoxia related ROP or the retinal problem picked up, the people started winning on the oxygen. At the same time, there was an increased survival of preterm because of the sophisticated ventilators available at that time, synchronized ventilation, surfactant availability, and the CPAP modality. They started saving smaller baby, about 28 weeks and more. And that was another reason why second epidemic of ROP occurred. In first decade of 2010 up to 2020, it has been expected that third epidemic is already there. And this is mainly because of the suboptimal care of the babies in the developing country and poor screening program as far as ROP is concerned. We know all this thing. The first is hyperoxia, as I told you, liberal use of oxygen, and then there was more and more survival of the preterm baby. We know that. Current concern for all neonatologists is this, that the oxygen trials, optimum oxygen trial to prevent oxygen-related injury like ROP, NEC, death, and many morbidities. The support trial, after support trial, people started accepting little bit high oxygen. And that has not done good for the babies. And in the most of the Western NICU, now there is a fourth epidemic of ROP happening. Before going further, as I told you, we need to understand why it happens. It's already been discussed earlier that it is part 1 of the phase 1 of ROP. Basically, ROP is about retinal vessel development occurs because of the vascular endothelial growth factors and the insulin growth factor. These are the two which controls the retinal development. Phase 1 is generally 20 to 28 weeks, where basically when baby is delivered, you try to normalize this oxygen as if they are delivered at full term. So you try to bring up the oxygen or the oxygen saturation. And this increase in the oxygen saturation obviously is going to down-regulates these two factors. So hyperoxia blunts the epithelial growth, or it brings the vasoconstriction. Now retina is still developing. Developing retina needs some oxygen, and this hypoxia or the relative hypoxia will increase the threshold for the IGF, VGF. And all this, in absence of the enough of the factors, will cause neovascularization, and that is where the phase 2 of ROP. So when you talk about the prevention, and as far as oxygen is concerned, you are going to work in this area where you try to bring up the oxygen to a level where adequate vascularization can take place. As far as prevention is concerned, I'm again saying it is screening, and the screening. But my worry is the look at the data between developed and the developing countries. The data from Canada, US, and you can see here that most of the ROP is happening below 32 weeks and below 1.5 kg. They do not have many ROPs sitting over here. So that means the screening program is so good that the ROP has been picked up right in time, oxygenation is maintained, other things are in place, and that is why incidence of ROP is restricted to this group. And that is why the Western criteria is ROP screening below 1.5 and below 32 weeks. If you look at the developing countries like India, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and all these things, look at these numbers and look at these dots spread all over the X and Y axis of this chart. You have got bigger babies, more than 1.5 kg baby being affected, being treated for the ROP. Not only that, babies beyond 32 weeks, up to 37, 38 weeks, you can see are being developing ROP and being treated for that. And that brings the most important part of the prevention ROP is screening. Any baby, I must say, forget about the protocols, forget about all these things. Any sick baby in the NICU having morbidities or having oxygen requirement, long of ventilators requirement, bad sepsis, bad shock, even if they are full term, even if they are delivered at higher weight, try to screen at least one reference ophthalmologist to rule out ROPs must. And this statement is supported by Vinakar's study here, where his KidROP program, you can see here in the India also, the bigger babies beyond 32, 35 weeks are being affected and they are being treated. If we look at the darker dots, they are in 1.5 to 2 kg also. So good number of babies still in the India also requires screening and requires ROP treatment. That shows some compromise at some level in the management. If management has been optimized, then probably this dot would have shifted over here, and that is the ideal goal. So the first part is screening most of the baby if possible, coming to the NICU or following or fitting in the protocol. So as far as any prevention in the newborn is concerned, it starts from the womb. And for that matter, our obstetric colleague need to be part of this team or part of this seminar. First part is, we know that ROP is a disease of prematurity. ROP is a disease related to oxygen toxicity. And as far as preterm is concerned, the obstetricians are in the front. They need to stop prematurity. If they can't, at least delay the preterm birth. They need to look at the factors which are contributing to the preterm birth, which are diabetic, hypertensive, placental dysfunction, growth restrictions, multiple pregnancies, prolonged rupture of membrane. All these are risk factors for the prematurity. And for that matter, cervical encirclage or whatever they want to do, try to give good prophylactic agents and try to delay or postpone the date of delivery as much as possible. Try to bring this little one near to the at least late preterm or term date. And while you are waiting while the mother is waiting in the labor room for the delivery, even if it is preterm baby below 34 weeks, always do not forget, please do not forget use of steroid. You know the cost of steroid? Just 200 rupees. And the benefits is millions. It prevents RDS, it decreases RDS, decreases pneumothorax, decreases NEC, decreases ROP. It's a plenty of benefits. So we need to make sure that obstetric colleagues do not forget to offer anti-steroid. As far as this seminar is concerned, you can see that steroid administration reduces risk of development of ROP by 18%, and progression to severe ROP decreases by 42%. Look at the numbers. Progression to severe ROP decreases by 42% by simple one drug, which is costing less than 200 rupees. Huge. And that's why, as far as prevention of ROP is concerned, no mother should be delivered if you had no preterm mother should no baby should be delivered preterm without antenatal corticosteroids. In India, we know that in the developed country, the second problem is small IUGR babies, small for gestational age babies. And if you look at this analysis, baby preterm IUGRs less than 29 weeks, they are at increased odds of any stage of ROP, severe ROP, or treated ROP. So IUGRs are associated with increased odds of ROP. So all sorts of efforts need to be put to see that baby should not develop IUGR, fetus should not be get into IUGR, and various things that can be tried as aspirin, low dose aspirins, proper maternal nutrition, anemia is to be treated, vitamin D deficiency is to be treated. If all these things are put in place, probably the incidence of severe growth retardation can decrease, and by doing that you can decrease or you can decrease the ratio of the development of ROP in this particular area. If mother gets into the preterm labor and suppose is delivering a fetus, preterm fetus, what are you going to offer in the labor room? As I told you that antenatal steroids are already been given, and buzzword in current era is delayed cord clamping. The cord should not be clamped before 60 seconds after birth. Cord should not be clamped before 60 seconds after birth. In fact, this was already suggested long back in history by Darwin. This was already suggested by them. It is only the human species who believes in cutting the cord. The rest of the species on the earth, the cord is not cut. Who goes and deliver them? Who cut cord for them? It is automatically, placenta automatically get detached. Human race is the only one who cuts the cord. And by doing that, you fail with that placental transfusion, that good amount of the blood has been transfused in that 60 seconds to the baby. Baby is delivered with the low hemoglobin, obviously will require blood transfusion. And I'm going to show you the data where blood transfusion within first 10 days increases incidence of severe ROP by 4 times. And that's why delayed clamping is to be religiously, to avoid this kind of blood transfusion, we need to delay the cord clamping. Cord should not be clamped before 60 seconds. Temperature extremes, high or low temperature, increase, changing the temperature or extreme the temperature. With extreme the temperature, there is change in the oxygen requirement. Oxygen requirement increases with both extreme of the temperature, hyperthermia and hypothermia. And that's why if you keep at the normal temperature, probably the ROP will decrease. Most important part is this, that everyone not till date, but at least in last decade was happy to bring this baby to pink color immediately after birth. And to do that, either oxygen was offered, 100% oxygen to the baby right at birth, or baby was tubed and vigorous resuscitation or vigorous Bagan mask was offered. We need to understand that baby will not turn pink. It is not required that baby should turn pink immediately after birth. This is not a time where I can discuss the saturation ranges in the labor room, but at 1 minute, we expect saturation of about 60 to 65%. Not more than that at 1 minute. By 10 minutes, you expect saturation at about 85 to 95%. So you have got 10 minutes to wait. Do not offer oxygen. Do not go do anything to improve that color of the baby. Baby without any, if there is everything was all right, baby will turn pink on its own within 5 to 10 minutes. So the seeds of ROP are already sown in the labor room if things are not in place. We need to make sure that these things are being observed religiously. Now, before going further, I would like to show the nature's way to protect fetus from high oxygen. This is the table where you can see the HB saturation, hemoglobin. That is, normally you see the SpO2 in adult patient, it is 98% arterial. That is what you and me have. As far as fetus is concerned, umbilical vein fetus saturation is 70%, artery saturation is 35%. So baby saturates about 30 to 40% while in utero. And hemoglobin in the fetus is about 60%, 16 gram per liter, 60 gram percent. And we know that with increase in gestation, hemoglobin increases. So if fetal hemoglobin increases with increasing gestation, you expect 11 gram at 24 weeks, about 13-14 gram at 32 weeks, and 37 weeks you expect 13 and 14 gram. This is nature's mechanism to avoid too much of the oxygen delivery to the fetus. Hemoglobin itself increases with increase in gestation age. When you calculate this ratio, the ratio of delivery to the consumption, you give high delivery, you give good oxygen to the baby, consumption is also been taken care by the nature. At 24 weeks, delivery to consumption ratio is 2.6:1, and at birth, delivery is there, consumption is less, so the ratio is 5:1. This is what happens. And if baby is delivered automatically, nature tries to control oxygen on its own without keeping baby away from the toxicity of the oxygen. What we do as a neonatologist, look at the phase 1 of ROP, that is 20 to 28 weeks. 3 different saturations been shown, 85, 90, 95. Generally at these weeks, I already shown that hemoglobin will be 12 to 14 gram. And if you look at the ratio, this ratio comes to 4.3, delivery to the consumption 4.6 and 4.8, which if this baby would have been in the womb would have been 2.6. That is what I showed over here. So after coming out, we try to increase this, and as a result, this ratio changes and baby becomes hyperoxic. Phase 2, about 33 weeks, again 3 saturations. And you can see here, what I wanted was 3.2 and what baby gets is 2.9. So during phase 1, if baby has come out prematurely, we offer high oxygen. And when is in this 33 weeks, we try to maintain baby with low hemoglobin, low oxygen. Your delivery to the consumption ratio is lower than what is required. And this brings problem to the baby. So maternal approach is try to increase delivery oxygen with increased gestation due to increase in the fetal. That is what the mother will do. And what we do, we decrease delivery with increased gestation due to accepting lower hemoglobin and lower SpO2. If I don't, you accept this lower hemoglobin, I'll give blood, which has got a lot of adult hemoglobin. And that is how the baby will also get affected. If I give a low SpO2, still is all right. But then it is totally against the nature's compensation, nature's way to manage the fetal hemoglobin. To answer this problem, oxygen saturation targeting various trials took place. What is the ideal oxygen to manage a baby in the labor room and in the NICU? Various trials are surfactant, positive pressure and oxygen randomized trial, support trial, Canadian oxygen trial, and benefits of oxygen saturation targeting. This is boost trial, phase 1, phase 2. It was spread over different continents, New Zealand, UK and Australia. They were to answer whether to keep this baby with the saturation of 85 to 89, this low saturation range, or higher saturation, which is 91 to 95. In which range this baby we are supposed to manage? Answer is here. You can see here that support ROP, thus in the low saturation, had lower incidence of ROP. 48% decrease in ROP if you manage this baby in the low oxygen targets. Even BPD was low, but the problem was here. When you try to keep this baby with a low saturation, the death and disability increased. If you would have managed this baby in higher saturation, there was less death. And that was worrisome for most of the people around the world. To answer this question further, this was 2010, further Canadian oxygen trial took place. They didn't show big difference whether you keep low saturation or the high saturation. But ultimately, all of them, they concluded that use of low saturation result in non-significantly higher rate of death or disability at 2 years in each trial, but it's insignificantly increase the risk of this combined outcome and of death alone in post-op combined analysis. So ultimately, whether significant is there is increased death and disability, and in fact, in the 2 continents, maybe UK and Australia, the boost trial was early terminated because they're convinced that with the low saturation target, there was increased death. So if you, I know that ROP is less in this saturation age, but death is more. And in medical legally, that is not been allowed. Why oxygen? We can see that during preterm birth, they have one of this problem. Do you give oxygen? This hyperoxia leads to the reactive oxygen species. And this reactive species cause a lot of problems in the genomes, DNAs, and all things related to oxygen radical injuries. And this has roots in the long-term morbidities like ROP, BPD, NEC, etc., etc. And that is where concern about ROP and oxygen. To answer this problem, there is another trial which is a meta-analysis of all 5 previous trials. SCOT trial, support trial, boost trial. This is a prospective randomized trial known as a NEOPROM. And it involves infants and 28 weeker. Target was between 2 saturations, 84, 89, 91 to 95. There is no effect on combined outcome of death or major disability or major disability alone, including blindness. So as far as NEOPROM is concerned, they're all right as far as the combined outcome of this concern. But they should realize that every 1,000 neonate, there was increase 28%, 2.8% increase risk of death, 2.3% increase of NEC. Of course, there is a 4% decrease in the ROP. So like we are trying to balance the thing by keeping baby in a low saturation, you can get rid of ROP, but there is increased NEC and increased death. What you want? You want to kill a baby or you want to get ROP, which can be treated later on. And in fact, this is the problem because of which all over the world people started accepting the ROP. They would not like to get problem like death, morbidities or NEC. And that will end up with the increased incidence of that third, fourth epidemic, post-support or post-perineopiorum, adopting of HiSPO2, increased epidemic of ROP even in the Western world because they started accepting higher saturation and we do not have any answer to that. I'm concerned about that ROP also because that is happening in front of me. I know that the lower saturation is good for my baby, but I can't keep because I'm worried about the death. Should I treat this ROP based on the phase 1 and phase 2? I know that phase 1 is because of the hyperoxia. I should control oxygen at that time. So what I would do that I try to keep saturation low in 85-89 up to 29-30 weeks of the gestation, during which the phase 1 of ROP is been happening. And later part, about 32-33 weeks, I try to give saturation on the higher side, which is 90-95%, because this is a time where hypoxia is causing neovascularization. So you are going to offer oxygen based on the pathogenesis progress of the ROP disease. And to keep everything in the place, this is a very good chart given in the pediatric research that babies less than 1.2, less than 29 weeker, or less than both 29 or 32 weekers. Phase 1, your target is 85-89%. In bigger babies, your target in phase 1 is 90-94%. Once baby is growing in your nursery, getting bigger, gaining weight, you try to keep saturation on higher side. So this is to avoid that hyperoxia responsible for phase 1, and this is to avoid that hypoxia which is responsible for phase 2. And there is reason to believe that because they've done this study, and this study included meta-analysis, and it showed that early low and late high CO2 was associated with the reduced risk of severe ROP. This already been tested and it is working well for the most of the nurseries. So apart from oxygen, what else is responsible ROP which we can prevent? Milk. We have shown that human milk versus formula feeds. Human milk decreases incidence of severe ROP or ROP requiring treatment by about 41%. 41% reduction by simply making sure that baby gets mother's own milk, MOM. If not possible, baby can get milk from the milk bank. And that is why there is increased demand of milk bank happening all over the world in the nurseries. You need to make sure that these babies are nourished well, and for that matter you are going to ask for the aggressive nutrition protocol, which includes early TPN for these babies. If you manage to see weight gain according to intrauterine accretion rate, then the risk of ROP, any stage ROP, is quite low, which can be seen over here. So aggressive parental and early enteral nutrition, it brings down the ROP. And weight gain is a very sensitive criteria. These are different studies which try to see the sensitivity of weight gain as far as prediction of ROP is concerned. And that's why there's a role of nutrition. Adequate nutrition will help to achieve better weight gain. If proportional weight gain is good, ROP is less. And how strong this statement is, you can see this study where Wien ROP study, where they included the postnatal weight gain at birth at 6 weeks, and they also included insulin growth factor. In fact, in the subsequently they discontinued IGF. They just try to keep a chart on the weight gain. And if the weight gain is good, you can see the predictor of ROP is 100%. If the weight gain is poor, the prediction is of the severe ROP is 100%. So all of us in neurologists would like to make sure that that chart is being used to regularly plot baby's weight. That should be a sort of religion in the nursery, that every week head circumference weight is being charted on the graph, and make sure that baby is gaining adequate weight according to what is required. Now to achieve that weight gain, you are using the fortifier. At times mother milk doesn't do the job for my preterm babies. You need extra calories. And how am I going to do that? I use fortifiers. And these fortifiers are coming from the cow's milk. Currently, fortifiers available in India are mainly from the cow milk source. But this is a recent study, it's a peer-reviewed, just July 2020 study being published. But Alan Lucas is one of the leading personality in the nutrition. And what he says that if you use human milk fortifier, it decreases ROP, incidence of ROP in comparison to the cow's milk fortifier. To tell the truth, friends, cow milk fortifier is quite easily available. One share says about 30 to 50 rupees. In India, there is only one company. I am not marketing product for them. Neolacta coming from Bangalore, they have human milk fortifier. But the problem is cost. The cost of human milk fortifier is something like 1,000 to 1,500 rupees per one bottle. This is it's available in the powder or the liquid one. I don't remember exactly, but the cost is exuberant. So to see that baby grow properly, this intervention may or may not work in our context. And so just to show in detail, these are 3 studies. You can see here the ROP, severe ROP with the human milk formula is 1.6%, against cow milk fortifier is 10%. Another RCT by Sylvian, as far as ROP grade 3 and 4 is concerned, 7.3% with the human milk fortifier, 6.3% with the cow's milk. And another study where the ROP 14% with human milk against 32% with the cow's milk. So there is some substance in using human milk fortifier, but in Indian context, it is not possible simply because the cost is exuberant. I already mentioned about use of real-time transfusions. This transfusion is mainly from the adult donors, and they have none of fetal hemoglobin. Mostly it is adult hemoglobin, which has more capacity to carry oxygen. Oxygen is less attached to the adult hemoglobin, more dealing with oxygen, and more oxygen-related toxicity, more generation of the reactive oxygen species, and more damage to the end organs like retina, kidney, liver, brain, lung, etc. Look at this almost 4-fold increase in the ROP baby develops transfusion in first 10 days. To avoid this, we need to make sure that judiciously, we need to go ask for information very judiciously. Minimum amount of blood is to be sent to the laboratory, and more important, the delayed cord clamping can help us in this area.
Yes,
what about steps? Pardon?
Can we conclude in next 2-3 minutes, sir?
Yeah, 10 minutes, maximum 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then is this area of sepsis where sepsis and retinopathy, the metal is already shown that this is like severe ROP and this is like both decreases with the sepsis. So there is increased risk of sepsis, of increased risk of ROP with the sepsis, and we need to make sure that our aseptic protocols are in place to avoid that sepsis in the NICU. What about vitamin A? Another study where vitamin A been used, the criteria as far as the matching of the group is concerned, these were the babies below 29 weeker, 1.1 kg babies. It include all SGS, RUR, and you can see here the ROP in the vitamin supplement group is quite less than no ROP was similar, but the grade 1 was as far as treatable ROP more than 2 plus disease were more in the control infants where vitamin A was not used. Current problem in the India is as far as, and those who are treated with vitamin A, there was 80 to 88% decrease in the ROP. That's huge number. By giving simple drug like vitamin A, the ROP decreases by 88%. In Indian context, the problem is the drug availability. We do not have vitamin A. As far as these are very small babies, oral supplementation is no question. Their guts are very delicate, and the osmolarity of the vitamin solution is very high. You can't offer the oral vitamin A. In that case, you are supposed to use parenteral vitamin A, which may not be a good idea, number one. And number two, at least Indian context is concerned, vitamin A injectable is not available. What about beta blockers? We'll not go into detail how that is work, but basically beta blocker is working at this level where normally the beta receptors are already there. With the phase 2, they get activated, and with help of VEGF, it causes neovascularization. Beta blockers, beta receptors is going to cause this. If you use beta blockers, it works as anti-VEGF, and it stops it decreases neovascularization. It helps in keeping baby away from ROP. There is a meta-analysis by Dr. Kabra from Surya Hospital, Bombay, and you can see here for the both thing, primary and secondary prevention, use of beta blocker decreases ROP. That does not mean that you don't call an ophthalmologist because now you are using propranolol or beta blocker orally or injectably. But orally, the ROP will not happen. Yes, it decreases significance, it decreases ROP significantly, but still screening will be required. What is required in our unit is a good practice, or I'll say the quality improvement projects. This is a project from a hospital in Oregon, and you can see here with the various intervention, they could bring down ROP. Again, it goes up. Again, whenever it goes up, they try to introduce some activity with which the ROP can be checked or when it kept under control. So quality improvement programs are must. To summarize, what we need is a points program or points intervention. P stands for the pain, because the pain is the one which varies, with which oxygen requirement varies. Try to keep baby under control, anticipate pain, put in a nesting position, put in a baby front position, temperature control, away from the noise, away from the lights, and more of kangaroo mother care. Lot of gentle handling is required. So this is very important as far as the prevention is concerned, control of the pain. We discussed in detail of the oxygen, but this is a little old slide. I will not put 89 to 94%. I'll put 91 to 94% as far as the oxygen targeting is concerned. Infection control program should be in place. Everyone in the nursery should wash their hands. Good nutrition is must, because nutrition is the one which can prevent ROP we already discussed. Keeping baby under warm temperature or in neutral temperature helps in the less required oxygen, and that is how it will help in keeping baby away from the ROP. And reduced blood sampling and volume blood taken decreases the blood transfusion. So best way to keep baby to prevent ROP will be first good screening program, and second antiviral steroid, and third will be proper oxygen targeting along with control of the sepsis, use of good nutrition, and then good supportive care. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for that excellent, insightful talk. on prevention aspects of ROP. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Basumati Vedantam. She is an eminent retinal surgeon.
I think Dr. Ashish should stop sharing his screen.
I stopped already.
Okay.
Okay, yes, I can see that. Yes, yeah. She is an eminent retinal surgeon with special interest in pediatric retina. She is a director at Radhatri Nethralaya, Chennai. As you can see, she's received innumerable awards and accolades for her outstanding community and academic work. She will tell us more about management updates in ROP. Over to you, Dr. Basumati.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shilpi.
Yeah.
I'll share my screen now. I think you have to stop sharing.
I just did. See?
Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Is it on slideshow? Okay. So first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Shilpi Shah, for this kind invitation. And it's indeed an honor to present my perspective on management of ROP to this, along with this august panel of distinguished neonatologists and ophthalmologists involved in the care of these extremely precious preterm babies. And thank you, INTAS, for organizing this webinar. So without much ado, I would be focusing my talk on management of ROP, mainly on lasers and anti-VEGF interventions. Now, prevention of ROP-related blindness, that is management of ROP, basically is primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. And primary level of prevention has been beautifully covered by Dr. Ashish in his exhaustive talk on how to reduce the incidence of the prematurity-related blindness. So I wouldn't go into that. I would rather focus on the prevention of secondary blindness due to ROP. The most important thing is, of course, is to screen for the pre-threshold ROP and the treatable ROP. And whenever treatable ROP is detected, we have to treat it within 72 hours. And nowadays, the golden period is a little shorter. They say even less than 48 hours if possible. And the gold standard of treatment initially in the cryo ROP study was by ablating the avascular retina by cryo. But of course, that necessitated general anesthesia, led to a lot of chemosis and unsatisfactory structural and functional outcomes. So nowadays, the gold standard is retinal ablation by laser photocoagulation. Initially, diode laser was used, but nowadays more of us prefer the double frequency Nd:YAG or the green laser or even the yellow laser for that matter. And the reason and the main reason for doing the retinal ablation is to reduce unfavorable outcome and vision loss. And of course, recently there has been a lot of interest over the past few years about the employment of anti-VEGF injections in ROP. And when everything fails, of course, we have the option of a surgical vitrectomy. So which type of ROP do we treat? Zone 1 ROP, any stage with plus disease. Zone 1 ROP stage 3, even if when there is no plus disease. For instance, when an infant is on oxygen still and develops a very severe stage 3 zone 1 ROP, the plus disease may not be apparent at all. And also zone 2, stage 2 or 3 with plus disease, and aggressive posterior ROP with new vessels, which is a special type of ROP which we see in Asian countries, and hybrid ROP, which is a combination of conventional ROP and aggressive posterior ROP. And this is how we use the diode or the double frequency Nd:YAG laser, wherein we photocoagulate the entire peripheral avascular retina. This is the ridge, and these are the new vessels, and the retina is vascularized only till this. So the entire avascular retina is the source of vascular endothelial growth factor. So the idea is by ablating this entire area within the retina and reduce its outpouring of VEGF and also reduces the demand of oxygen, thereby treating the retinopathy of prematurity. The principle is quite akin to the treatment of diabetic retinopathy by laser. And once when adequately ablated, this retina gets thinned, It doesn't need that much oxygen anymore because its metabolic activity of a thin retina is much less, and therefore the outpouring of VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, is reduced. So ROP regresses, and once ROP regresses, the vessels start developing towards the periphery of the retina. And once the vessels reach the periphery of the retina, ROP cannot recur back again. Now, that is the reason why they say that laser, if well done, it results in a permanent cure of ROP. After the BEAT ROP results were published in the New England Journal of Medicine, wherein the efficacy of intravitreal bevacizumab anti-vascular endothelial growth factor injection for stage 3 plus retinopathy of prematurity was proved beyond doubt, the anti-VEGF agents are here to stay in the management of ROP. These are the important results of the BEAT ROP trial, which clearly showed that intravitreal bevacizumab monotherapy, as compared with conventional laser therapy in infants at stage 3 plus ROP, definitely showed a significant benefit for zone 1, that is very posterior ROP, which occurs in very small babies, but the benefit was not so statistically significant in zone 2 disease, which occurs in relatively older babies when the ROP is not so severe. But another important conclusion of the study was the development of the peripheral retinal vessels was proved to continue after treatment with intravitreal bevacizumab, in contrast to a conventional laser therapy, which obviously leads to permanent destruction of the peripheral retina, especially if the laser marks are quite strong. And so the zone 1 ROP babies definitely did better vis-a-vis a lower rate of recurrent neovascularization when compared to those undergoing laser. And recently we have the published Rainbow trial in which the efficacy of the second antivascular endothelial growth factor agent, ranibizumab, has been clearly proved. In fact, 80% of the babies did quite well when compared to just about 66% with laser. And this is how an anti-VEGF injection is given. There is no need of general anesthesia or even topical anesthesia, preferably done in the operation theater or sometimes even in the neonatal intensive care unit with the neonatologist monitoring. Half the adult dose is injected with a 30-gauge needle, and a cotton-tipped applicator is placed. And of course, everything is done after a sterile draping and the placement of this is what we call as a speculum. And you can see that everything is over within less than a minute. There are several peer-reviewed publications which illustrate the efficacy of anti-VEGF agents. And this is our publication published last year in the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology, which has the world's largest series of intravitreal aflibercept, which is another anti-VEGF agent in retinopathy of prematurity, wherein we saw regression of ROP in 100% of cases. And this is another publication showing regression of ROP in 94.4% of cases. And this is from our publication in the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. These are the pre-injection pictures, and this is the 1 week post-injection picture showing a beautiful reduction in the tortuosity and dilatation of the vessels. And you can see that the ROP is much on its way to recovery. And another picture, this is a pre-injection. It looks so bad, highly vascular. And within a week, you can see that the vascularity is coming down. The baby is definitely getting better. And the important concern is the anti-VEGF agents may reduce the chance of the baby getting complete vascularization. As I already mentioned, when we do laser well and completely, the ROP stops and the vessels start growing to the periphery. So ROP cannot come back, because retinopathy of prematurity can only occur when the retina still remains incompletely vascularized. Because when the retina is incompletely vascularized, it is a source of VEGF. So there is always a chance that ROP can come back. So we are bothered about whether the retina completely vascularizes following any treatment that we do, be it laser or anti-VEGF injection, and we are supposed to look for that. In our study, we found that 81.8% of zone 1 ROP eyes, aflibercept facilitate the continuation of retinal vascular development following the regression of ROP. And also another important point and advantage of anti-VEGF injections vis-a-vis laser is that definitely eyes which receive laser treatment have higher incidence of myopia, and when compared to eyes which receive intravitreal bevacizumab, or for that matter any anti-VEGF agent, because when we give an anti-VEGF injection, the anterior segment, that is the front portion of the eye, still continues to develop, whereas following a laser treatment, the development of the anterior segment is lagging behind, which leads to a very high myopia. So to just summarize, so when do we give anti-VEGF injections in ROP and when do we do lasers? Now, when the infant is severely ill on an oscillating ventilator and the neonatologist says, no way you're going to do a 2 to 3 hours of a laser on my baby who is so precious and precarious, then we give an anti-VEGF injection, which is going to be less than a minute. Supposing the baby has severe hyphema, which is blood in the anterior chamber, or vitreous hemorrhage, blood in the posterior chamber, which precludes us an adequate visualization for laser, or baby has severe lid edema, we cannot put the speculum, and dense tunica vasculosa lentis, which are a network of tendrils in and around the pupil, which are a sign of gross immaturity, because of which the pupils don't dilate well. Again, we can't do a very good laser ablation. Very severe ROP or aggressive posterior ROP, especially very posterior zone 1 ROP when the retina is not developed at all. If we are going to ablate the entire retina, then we are almost destroying the baby's peripheral vision. So in case the baby grows up and wants to drive a car, there are certain ethical questions to be answered. We wipe out the peripheral retina of the baby. In effect, the baby can see only in the center in the form of tunnel vision, but the baby is cured of ROP. So are we justified in doing that? So that's an ethical question. So in very severe ROP, especially posterior ROP, anti-VEGF injections are warranted, and many of us have started employing that as a first modality in very posterior ROP. And certain unusual situations like this is transfusion-associated acute lung injury or Trally syndrome. This was a baby which had threshold ROP, and I did laser in both the eyes. I don't have the pre-laser pictures. And 1 week later, when I went to see the baby, to my horror, I found bilateral exudative detachments right up to the lens. So on questioning, I found out that the baby had received blood transfusion in that week and had developed a lot of pulmonary edema. So the neonatologist had suspected Trally. So I assumed that this exudative detachment in the baby could also be due to that. So I injected bilateral Avastin, bevacizumab, anti-VEGF injection in both the babies. And these are the post-anti-VEGF pictures. You can see that the plus disease is still, residual plus disease is there. You can see here, and this is all the subretinal fibrin. And these lines are also the subretinal fibrin following the resolution of the exudative detachments. And then, but you can see that the exudative detachments are beautifully resolved 1 week after the anti-VEGF injections. This is the left eye of the baby. This is the right eye of the baby. And you can see again the lines here, all suggesting the resolved exudative RD. So this baby continued to do well. And this is by video indirect ophthalmoscopy, wherein we are able to evaluate the retinal status by indirect ophthalmoscopy, at the same time take a video. And you can see the laser marks. This was the laser marks post the first laser photocoagulation, which I did, and the ROP is very well resolved. The schedule of this is Dr. Mins Hittner, who is the main lady behind the BEAT ROP study. And this is a rigorous follow-up that we have to do after anti-VEGF injections. So to summarize, if we give an anti-VEGF injection for a 24-weeker, in the first year of life, even if ROP doesn't recur, it will require up to 14 examinations. So both the parents, the neonatologist, and the pediatric retina specialist have to be, in sync. We have to impress upon the parents that it's not like, you inject, ROP becomes okay, then you don't have to come back. It's not so. You have to come back many number of times because ROP can recur late also following an anti-VEGF injection. And why do we need this longer follow-up? Because recurrence of ROP, especially after bevacizumab injection, has been reported very late. In fact, 1 year ago, we had a study, which was a very scary case report, actually, in which ROP was seen 3 years after a bevacizumab injection in a baby with a very bad outcome. So we need to have a longer follow-up in infants who are treated with an anti-VEGF injection. So supposing there is a possibility that you're not sure about the parents' level of understanding and the compliance, if you're thinking that the infant will not be seen regularly, then it's better to add laser to make sure that ROP doesn't come back. You have the advantage that when you give the anti-VEGF injection, ROP becomes all right. So the vessels start developing. So it's not you won't be ablating too much of the retina, and you do laser. So you prevent against the future possibility of an ROP recurrence. Now, what are the advantages of laser? It's a finite procedure, finite follow-up. And of course, because we are lasering the peripheral retina, there's a theoretical protection against retinal tears and retinal detachment. Though if your laser marks are very strong, you yourself could create an iatrogenic retinal break. There is no risk of infection in contrast to an anti-VEGF injection, and no worry about possible neurodevelopmental effects of anti-VEGF treatment, which I'll be coming to shortly. The disadvantage is, of course, it's a very difficult procedure to learn and master. In contrast to an anti-VEGF agent, which is very simple to administer, you may have some skip areas and you miss it. Then in that case, ROP recurs. And of course, there is peripheral field loss, inflammation, and anterior segment ischemia, cataract with excessive laser. And of course, in India, we don't use, general anesthesia, but in the UK, still a lot of babies undergo general anesthesia for even laser. So more number of general anesthesia that you give, definitely a lot of late developmental delays and risks associated with that. Now, advantages of anti-VEGF injections, of course, very easy to use, very rapid response, probably better visual fields and better visual acuity, and reduced incidence of strabismus, that is squint as well. But disadvantages, of course, if you go in too anterior, you may strike the lens. There is a risk of infection. And of course, the infant vitreous, preterm vitreous is very viscous. So there is an increase in the half-life of intravitreal drugs. So the vessels don't start to develop. Sometimes we have seen after anti-VEGF injections, the retina taking a peculiarly long time to develop to the periphery. Sometimes months, sometimes it doesn't develop at all also. So, and the recurrence of ROP can also occur very late. And as the babies grow bigger, the follow-up also becomes very challenging. Even for an examination, sometimes we've had to request for general anesthesia because baby is not cooperative. And we don't know the long-term effects of these drugs in a preterm baby. We don't know how much drug we should inject. There are certain uncertainties about dosage, which is safe, etc. And as I told you, there is a risk of delayed vascularization, probably because of reduction of retinal vascular area and inhibition of retinal vasculogenesis following anti-VEGF injections. And most important, what is the systemic effect due to anti-VEGF injections? These are the anti-VEGF injections in use. And let's forget pegaptanin. Bevacizumab, you see, has got a long systemic half-life of 20 days in contrast to ranibizumab, which is just 0.09 or 6 hours. So what happens is, and this is going to circulate in the systemic circulation for so long, and you can see that the serum VEGF concentration has dropped from 1628 to 269 pg per ml following Avastin injection. And all of us know that VEGF is so important in a preterm baby, especially for the development of the pulmonary vasculature, cerebral vasculature, etc. And these babies are already at risk for necrotizing enterocolitis, BPD, and all that. So if such precarious drops in the systemic VEGF levels happen after an anti-VEGF injection in the eye, then we really have to bother about the systemic effects of these anti-VEGF agents. And when everything fails, or even when we do a very late laser, for instance, as in this baby, there is a progressive retinal nasal traction. It's continuously progressive. Then we go in for a lens sparing vitrectomy. You can see that the results are not, structural outcome is not so good when compared to a baby which has not undergone a tractional detachment and a vitrectomy, but still the baby has got navigatory vision, as in this case. We're able to attach the retina and give the baby some sort of a vision. So vitrectomy is the last course of action when everything fails. And of course, ROP blindness prevention, tertiary aspects we have to bother about, finding out the refractive errors in these preterm babies, as well as the amblyopia or the lazy eye and the squint. And a pediatric ophthalmologist has to continuously see these babies. So to summarize, the key to successful treatment strategy in ROP is a judicious combination of careful selection and screening of infants. And if we the main important thing is the timing of the laser treatment. The screening has to be aggressive and the laser treatment has to be done appropriately at the correct time. This was a baby who was referred to me late, had a very bad ROP. I tried lasering, but still the retina continued to detach. So the baby underwent bilateral lens sparing vitrectomy. I did a bilateral lens sparing vitrectomy. You can see that post vitrectomy in about after 2 months, the baby is able to fix and follow the light pretty well. You can see that. But then if you closely observe, you can see that the baby's eyes are moving. It's got nystagmus. And the baby also had a refractive error of -14, which is like a very high minus power.
Excellent.
So it's a very sobering thought that despite advances in surgical techniques and all that, had we just, screened and treated at the correct time, this baby would be as normal as any of its other contemporaries. So the onus is on all of us by a concerted and cooperative care between pediatric retina specialist, obstetrician, and the neonatologist that we can reduce the incidence of this unnecessary needless blindness due to ROP in these preterm babies. So thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Shilpi, you are muted. You're muted.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vasumati, for that detailed, informative talk on lasers and anti-VEGF in ROP. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Alay Bankar and Dr. Ravi Parikh to join for the panel discussion. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
As we know, Dr. Alay Bankar is a very renowned retina surgeon. He's an alumni of Sankar Nethralaya, and he's done his fellowship from University of California. He's received innumerable accolades in his fantastic 3-decade-long career. He is also the pioneer of ROP services in Gujarat, and he runs the Telemedicine Gujarat ROP project. Dr. Ravi Parikh is a consultant neonatologist at Setu Newborn Care Center, Ahmedabad. He has done his extensive neonatal training from UK. During his tenure in the UK, he obtained his CCST and MRC-PCH and FRC-PCH. Please join.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpi.
Okay, so we'll start with the questions. There are a few questions that have come across, and you all can still use the chat box if you have any queries. So we'll start with Dr. Alay Bankar. The first one is, are there any contraindications for anti-VEGF treatment in these premature babies?
I think the first contraindication is if the neonatologist does not allow us to use the anti-VEGF injections because of various systemic reasons. That is the most important contraindication, because as Dr. Vasumati mentioned, the indications for use of anti-VEGFs are primarily in very severe ROP. So it's particularly those babies who are already extremely low birth weight, or who have undergone a turbulent era as soon as they are born. They are already at a very high risk. So if the baby is not very stable, then of course it's not likely to help. And mainly it's the type, the indication of ROP. It's not that this is a blanket therapy. As Vasumati mentioned, there are specific indications where you can use anti-VEGF therapy as a primary treatment. So if it comes outside the purview of those indications, one should not use it as a primary therapy.
All right. The next one is for Dr. Ashish Bhai. The pediatrician from Ahmedabad has asked, what are pediatricians' responsibility on the medical legal aspect of ROP?
Simply call the ophthalmologist for the high-risk babies, follow the protocols. Mind well that in India, we see ROP in a bigger babies. AP ROP is the one which progresses very fast. First examination is looking all right. In the next one, after 15 days, the ROP is progressed very quickly. So because the bigger baby and is feeding well, that does not mean that you don't follow the protocol. We know the protocol. Any baby less than 1.5 kg, any baby less than 34 acre, ROP examination is must number one. Number 2, even up to 37 weeker and a rough course in the NICU means ventilation, oxygen requirements, sepsis, shock, they should be subjected to the eye check.
So can I add one small comment?
Please.
I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I think it's for the pediatricians that ROP examination, or for that matter even screening, is not under the purview of a general ophthalmologist. You need special training to learn skills, how to screen and check a ROP baby. So, I get calls from pediatricians that I've already got this baby examined by a general ophthalmologist. We also have the reports of the general ophthalmologist. And majority of the times, if you've seen Shilpi showed the slide, most ophthalmologists use the direct ophthalmoscope. This is not the way you can screen an ROP baby, because you're not going to see a ROP disease. So it's not that I would say majority of the ophthalmologists are not in a position to do an ROP screening. And you need to be trained. I think a retina specialist or a pediatric ophthalmologist are the only people who are probably able to do a good ROP screening.
Can I add one thing, Shilpi?
Yes, please, doctor.
The main caveat falls is if the baby is in NICU, like if it is less than 30 weeks, 28 weeks, so is likely to stay for 3 to 4 weeks, then that's fine. But what we additionally do for medical legal purposes as well, if baby is like 1.7, 1.6, so is likely to get discharged at 15 days, then we give them the leaflet for the ROP and take their signature on the discharge as well, that it has been informed, because sometimes they don't take it very seriously and they would get lost to follow up as well. And especially it happens, as we saw from Dr. Ashish's slide as well, that the IUGR babies are also more risk for the ROP. So that is very, very important, that when you discharge, if early than a month, or if in less than 28 weeks, we go at 3 weeks. But if you discharge any baby before screening and for ROP in NICU, then it is very important to inform parents and take the signature at discharge that we have already given them the information, because in case if they don't understand or take the importance of it, then we can, as a neonatologist, we will be the primary person to get into trouble. So that's very important.
Second thing I'd like to add here, that commonly the parents will say, particularly about the group that Ravi is mentioning, the baby is not staying in the nursery for very long, number 1. And number 2, they find that baby is on the breastfeeding for 1.8 kg baby, who is 35 week, is IUGR baby. For parents, that baby is looking perfectly all right. And they will, for the moment we say that eye check is required, they will start being suspicious on you and me, saying that why do you want eye check, number 1. And number 2, they'll positively ask you that नजीक में हमारा डॉक्टर तो आँखना डॉक्टर से हमने बता भी दी है.
Yes.
So the answer would be that I am not ophthalmologist, number 1, so I don't know anything about this baby's eye. This is to be checked by the people who have special training to look into this detail. Third thing, absolutely right, take it on the paper that this has been explained. He give the appointment, they're supposed to go wherever they want to go, but this is a time where this baby is supposed to be checked. This is what is required. Yeah, Vasumati.
I would also suggest that here we have actually started putting posters in the NICU, wherein the mothers, when they come to feed the baby, they know, they keep looking at the posters, they understand that this is a condition which their baby might also develop. Plus an in-house screening at the NICU itself before the baby gets discharged, or even after the baby gets discharged, it can come back to the NICU at the correct time, instead of going to the pediatric retina specialist or ophthalmologist office, at least for the first checkup, so that the parents understand and then they follow the routine. So that has sort of improved the follow-up and has prevented missing of a lot of babies. Plus, it's important that we follow the National Neonatology Forum guidelines for ROP screening and don't miss out the babies with higher gestational age. At the same time, babies with low gestational age and low birth weight, that is less than 28 weeks gestational age and less than 750 grams, have to be screened at day 20 to prevent us from missing out on aggressive posterior ROP. So both the day 20 and day 30, that's what we call as 30 दिन या 20 दिन रोशनी के. That's what it's very easy to remember. So that the neonatologist has to emphasize to the parents. So all the neonatologists in the NICUs, if they start this process of an in-house screening of the babies, both which are in the NICU as well as which have just got discharged from the NICU, they can come back on a particular day. We have an ROP day, say Wednesday or Thursday, and the pediatric retina specialist comes there or sends the team with the RetCam or the imaging device. So that way we will encourage the parents not to, be lost from follow-up. And regarding the medico-legal, there's one very important point which all ophthalmologists and pediatric retina specialists should do, and the neonatologist also should take care to see whether that's being written. Accurate documentation of the ROP screening data. That is, clearly we have to write like after dilatation, indirect ophthalmoscopy, ROP screening by indirect ophthalmoscopy was done, or by RetCam screening was done. The words after dilatation is important, because if you recall the case history of the Madras, the Supreme Court judgment and all that, there was no mention of the words after dilatation. So when they use a direct ophthalmoscope, then even without dilatation, little bit of the central retina can be seen. So that's not a very good, robust ROP screening. So the words after dilatation or after putting dilating drops, indirect ophthalmoscopy or RetCam screening, ROP screening done like that, those words are very important in the documentation. So all the neonatologists and pediatricians should see whether the ROP screening data contains these words. This is to prevent all of us from getting embroiled in future medico-legal complications. And with long-term use of widespread use of the imaging techniques, again, we have a documentation of the baby's findings, which again will reduce the incidence of medico-legal complications. And in fact, you can explain to the parents, see that, baby's eyes look absolutely all right from outside, but see what a horrific bleeding is there inside. So that way, the parents will also be convinced about the need to bring the baby for treatment or follow-up.
Excellent. So to summarize, from a pediatrician's perspective, to avoid any medico-legal aspects, proper documentation of the conversation is absolutely essential. You just don't write ROP screening. You have to write preferably the institute or the doctor that you have referred to, so that you know that it's a specialist ROP doctor, not just a general ophthalmologist. You have to preferably write a day or a time frame that you have to be seen within this day, and preferably you can write a contact number so that there is some evidence that you not just casually said that you need an eye checkup, but you actually explain them that this is important and you can't let it go. Because many times parents think that the baby does not need to go out, he'll catch an infection, maybe the eyes look fine, we'll get it done some other time later on. So proper documentation is imperative. Right. Anything else that you would like to add? Right. Okay. So we'll move on to our next one. Is about how to prepare a baby for ROP procedure and what precautions to be taken afterwards. Are there anything they need to watch out for?
Yeah, because ROP, this was discussed recently, that as far as preparation is concerned, you just try to make baby comfortable. You may give a little bit of sucrose or may give breast milk into the mouth, so that will help in the pain relief and all that. The trained person or the fellow or registered should accompany the ophthalmologist while eyes are being checked. So he or she will be monitoring the vitals. And after the procedures, we need to be keeping an eye on the oxygen requirement of the baby. At times, because of the BPD, you find oxygen requirements start going up, baby becomes apneic occasionally. There are some incidences of abdominal distension, baby getting early NEC kind of pictures. So some clinical instability can happen. But mind well, this has been researched vigorously. This is not because of the ophthalmic friend. It is only because of the procedure pain, number one, or it can be because of the irrational use of the mydriatic drops. Phenylephrine is the one which is to be in a proper judicious percentages. Recently, we had reviewed this topic and we find that even 1% phenylephrine should be phenylephrine should be all right. We have in the market 5%, which is adult dose, so that is to be diluted properly, which should come to 2.5%. So if you keep an eye on all this thing, generally most of the baby will tolerate ROP screening very well.
Fantastic. Right. Okay, Dr. Ravi, you've done a lot of work in neonatology in the UK and also in India. Do you find any huge difference in the incidence and the care of ROP in these two countries?
If you the first most important thing is, if you see the screening criteria, which I think it has been mentioned in the previous slide, in all the developed countries, including UK, the criteria was less than 32 weeks and less than 1.5 kg. And for India, if we go for this one, then there are a lot of papers which are almost 6 to 10% of the ROP will be missed. So that is very, very important. We here see a lot of IUGR babies and babies even with 2.1, 2.2 kg who has a bad septic episode from outside as well. And we subject those babies for ROP, and we get positive ROP sometimes in these babies. So important is the population. So we have to not only the premature babies, but the term babies who had an RDS, who was ventilated, who had a bad septic episode. All those babies, little bit incidence is high in India, and we see from the epidemic third one as well that these are the babies. If we all treat it, and if we religiously go for all the indications for screening these babies, then we can decrease the incidence of ROP or blindness in such babies. So I think it is very, very important that up to 2 kilogram and up to less than 2 kilogram and less than 34 weeks, plus any sick babies who had sepsis or RDS, ventilated, had blood transfusion, or any other indication. Mind well, the twins also, the incidence of ROP is more. It may be due to the in utero event or twin to twin, but definitely in twins also the ROP incidence is more. So those all important thing is that in our population, because of the nutrition and other thing, overall prematurity and IUGR is more, plus the indications are also more. So definitely the incidence is more. So we have to be more vigilant than developed countries. Care of things are like few things is that majority of times in UK, as Dr. Vasumati mentioned, that they were using laser only, and they were coming to the unit. But for if the baby is stable, we generally send to you as well, sometimes at the other hospital as well. But otherwise, for the care of that, there is no other difference. Because we also have you all trained people for carrying the baby. So I don't think. But my other worry is follow up as well. Now, few important thing is how long. I want to ask you as well that our babies, when they are coming to you, how long you ask them to follow up.
Nice. Second thing, Ravi, I'll just add on to that the fact that we do not have blender in most of the labor room, the places where we attend the delivery, the right from word go, this baby gets 100% oxygen. Of course, this is happening in last decade that people have started using less amount of oxygen for the resuscitation. For the full-term baby, it is almost now room air with which they are supposed to resuscitate, in spite of having hypoxic encephalo kind of pitch setting. For the preterm babies, you try to resuscitate 21 to 30%. Time didn't permit me to go into all this detail in my presentation, but a good question that in India, we have certain limitations. And I always keep on telling in each and every lecture, the places where the books are written are not the places that we work or where it has been researched. So probably in our setting, the things are little different. Incidence of sepsis is very high, nutrition is not optimum, and oxygen monitoring is there, but the delivery devices for the delivery oxygens are also not optimum. These are the reason why we are seeing more incidence in the bigger babies.
I think, Dr. Ravi, I tell all my ROP babies that your follow-up is lifelong.
Okay.
You have to counsel parents, because it's not just ROP disease. Dr. Vasumati said it's a sequelae. It's not even the sequelae. Even any premature child, even if he did not have a positive ROP, he can develop refractive errors, he can develop squint, he can develop amblyopia. So that is very important to tell the patients that yes, ROP is not there. That does not mean you are free. And now actually it's good that in India we have started school vision screening program. Previously in my earlier practice, we used to see children come at 12 years of age when they first realized that they had a refractive error. So early school vision has probably decreased the incidence of a late recognition of refractive errors. But yes, I tell all my babies that you have to come at least once in a year for your routine eye checkup.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. That is
Vasupati
very
madam,
important.
Alay Banker sir, just one question. At what you think once you discharge them and you write as a follow up at 1 year, any studies in India or like personally you have done, which how many percentage of the babies would be following you at 1 year for other problems following ROP?
I think it depends. We run a very good screening program. So our team is constantly after them. We keep calling them. Everybody has a mobile now. We send a message, text message. So last year we analyzed our data of 8 years of ROP screening program, and our follow-up rate was about 92%.
At 1 year?
No. This is over 8 years.
Over 8 years, okay.
Yeah. So I think this is a pretty good follow-up. But I think you need people to constantly remind them. You have to be after them. And I think most importantly is when you counsel the parents the first time, that is the time you motivate them. See, if you had not told this initially, and if you call them after 1 year and say you have to come again, they will feel something is fishy. Why are you calling me now? You never mentioned that. So you mention it from the time you're discharged. You tell them that lifelong, and it's fine. You don't tell them that you have to come to me, but you have to call them and find out, okay, have you seen an ophthalmologist? It's time you have an eye examination done.
This is not only true for babies which develop ROP,
for any premature baby.
Yeah, even if it's like well vascularized and we tell them that there's no risk of ROP, still we tell them to come back at 1 year to rule out refractive error and squint.
That's right.
I agree completely that if you tell that in the very beginning when you discharge from your ROP clinic, then they know that these are the babies slightly at a higher risk of developing squint or refractive error than a normal full-term infant. So they will definitely come, and that will improve your follow-up rates.
But in that cases where there is no ROP and you are for simple preterm and you are requesting for the follow-up for the eye checkup maybe 1 year after 2 years, when they are coming from the periphery, you know that they can't come to the center for the proper retina specialist. So this kind of follow-up where the ROP is not there, can we guide them to the local ophthalmologist?
Yes.
Or do you want them to go to retina specialist only?
No.
They don't need to see a
They can go to any ophthalmologist. It is basically for a refractive error checkup and amblyopia checkup. But just this month, there has been a very nice paper published by the Taiwanese group where they have followed up normal babies, as Dr. Vasumati is saying, babies who did not have a positive ROP, and their follow-up ranged from 77 to 72 years. And they found that there is an incidence of about 26% of retinal abnormalities, including retinal detachment, even in those babies. So that is why I keep stressing to all my babies that whoever baby I screen for ROP, I tell them it is a lifelong thing. You have to follow up lifelong. And as you mentioned, Dr. Ashish Bhai, yes, maybe after 1 year, he might not see a retina specialist, but I think it's a good practice that when the child gets older, at least once in a year, he should have a retinal examination done.
Yes. And again, when they are very young baby, not all general ophthalmologists are well versed to do the retinoscopy. They cannot detect refractive error. So it is good to send them to a good pediatric ophthalmologist at least who can refract them. Because
now there are retina specialists in every corner of the city and the state. So I think that's not going to be a problem for any baby. There are hundreds of retina specialists who can do a good peripheral retina. They need a peripheral retinal evaluation, see, not a central one. So a peripheral retinal evaluation would be done only by a good retina specialist because they would need depression, which only a good retina specialist would be able to do.
Okay. And I think it's about the time, so we call it a day. If you have any further queries, you feel free to email to any of us. And thank you so much, all the speakers and panelists, for your invaluable time. And thank you, INSAS, for the support and this initiative.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you all the participants.
You all.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Snehal.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Shilpi, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Alok.
This
Thank you,
opportunity. Yeah.
all of you for a fantastic support. It all went very smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.